I'm Miranda, and this is Post-its and Pens. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Miranda, and here you will find a little beauty, a little books, and a little teaching content. So if that sounds like something you might enjoy, I would love for you to subscribe and stick around and join me in my little corner of YouTube. Today's video is going to be my reading recap for the month of November. So let's go ahead and get into the video. In the month of November, I took part in Knock It Out November, which was hosted by Cassidy over at Covers with Cassidy, where basically you set yourself some reading goals and then you read books to achieve those goals. So the majority of my goals were focusing on finishing off books from the various lists that I had made at the start of the year, and I am happy to report that I checked off every one of my Knock It Out November goals, so go me. And now we're just gonna kind of run through everything that I read during the month. Now I'm gonna do this a little bit differently because I read a lot of books in November, and I've decided that rather than running through synopses for every single book that I read in the month, I'm going to just focus on my favorite and my most disappointing, and then I will just run through the rest of them and give you like star ratings. The reason for this is that the majority of these books were part of reading vlogs, which I will mention as I go through, and I will link the vlogs up above and in the description box. So if you want more information on my feelings behind each book, check out those vlogs because that's where I go a lot more in depth, and that way this video does not have to be 20 hours long. So we're gonna go ahead and just run through the ratings first. I'm going to start with my least favorite books to my favorite books and just run through the ratings that way. So first of all, in November, I did have 2 DNFs. So the first one was All the Missing Girls by Megan Miranda, and the second one was Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. Both of these I got to about the 30 to 40% mark and just realized they were not for me. I did not like the way All the Missing Girls was written. It was written backwards. So you started with like the finale and then worked backwards to see how things worked out. And because of that, I did not find a whole lot of suspense. I didn't find myself really gripped or interested in the story. And for a title, All the Missing Girls, there were actually only 2 missing girls, and I felt like the whole thing was just a bit of a letdown. So I DNF'd that one. The other one was a book from my 22 in 2022 list, Daughter of Smoke and Bone. So this was a bit of a bummer, but I just realized that that type of fantasy is not really what I want to be reading at this point in my reading life. So I just DNF'd because I knew I was not going to enjoy the book. So those are the 2 that I DNF'd, and now we'll go ahead and run through the ones that I did read all the way through. So coming in at number 10 is Extraordinary by Nancy Werlin, and I gave this one 2 stars. At number 9 is The Favorite by Kiera. This is a novella set in her selection universe. I also gave this one 2 stars. At number 8 was the 11th Nancy Drew book, The Clue of the Broken Locket, which I gave 3 stars. At number 7 is The Replacement by Brenna Yovanoff, which I also gave 3 stars. I did a whole vlog on this book, so check that out. It's linked up above. At number 6 is Kingdom of Ashes by Rhiannon, which I gave 3 stars. At number 5 is House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson, which I gave 3.5 stars. This was the November pick for the Literally Dead book club. At number 4 is Grey Warren by Maggie Stiefvater, which I also gave 3.5 stars. At number 3 is House of Many Ways by Diana Wynne Jones, which I gave 4 stars. At number 2 is A Promised Land by Barack Obama, which I also gave 4 stars. And at number 1, my favorite book of the month was Sword and Pen by Rachel Keene, which I gave 5 stars. So I'm going to go ahead and talk just a tiny bit about this series as a whole, because this is actually the 5th and final book in Rachel Kane's The Great Library series. This is a dystopian take on if the Library of Alexandria had survived, and basically the people in charge of the library have been determining what information they want to get out and what information they feel needs to stay hidden, because they kind of want to like pump the brakes on the release of knowledge, because they feel like there is some knowledge that is too dangerous to let out into the world. And basically the library wants to control everything that is put out into the world. And because of that, they do some really shady things that this group of library initiates kind of uncovers in the first book. And then the series kind of follows them as they try to figure out what to do about it. So I will say this 5th book was an absolutely phenomenal series finale. I loved every single minute of this book. I did listen to this on audio and do some physical reading, but it was really, really well done. I did talk about this in my final book support group vlog, which I will link up above. So check that out if you are curious. But this book and this series is truly phenomenal, and I would highly recommend it. As for my most disappointing book, I am going to go with All the Missing Girls by Megan Miranda. I was really drawn in by the cover of this book, the whole Ferris wheel. I also didn't really know what to expect. This was the first Megan Miranda book that I had ever tried to read, and I have heard really good things about her writing, but this book just did not work for me. As I mentioned, it's told backwards, so you're kind of like given the beginning of the book is like in current time, but then after you get this introduction, the book is told backwards from like day 14 backwards to day 1, and I felt like we have a bit of an unreliable narrator for one thing, which can be good. But in this case, it was very clear that she knew more than what you as the reader knew, but she was like pretending that she didn't. I don't really know how else to word that. And because of that, I just really did not vibe with the writing, really did not vibe with the main character, and I just did not like how this book was written. So this was disappointing. This was supposed to be my buzzword pick. The pick was a book with ing in the title. So I'm bummed that I wasn't able to finish this one, but I just knew if I was going to push through it that it would get a pretty low rating. And there's so many other books out there that I wanted to read that I just decided to DNF this one. So definitely a disappointment, but I am going to try to read some of Megan Miranda's other books. We'll see if maybe she can be an author for me, and maybe this book is like a one-off and it just doesn't work well. But yeah, we'll just see, because I do have some other books by her on my TBR that I would like to read at some point. Now, as I mentioned, I did do some vlogging last month, so a vast majority of the books that I read in the month of November are covered in those vlogs. As I mentioned, I did a dedicated vlog to The Replacement by Brenna Yovanoff. That was one of the books on my 22 and 2022 list, so check that out. It's linked above and below. I also did a vlog for the final book support group, as I'd mentioned, which is where I read almost all of the series books. So if you want to know more about Sword and Pen, Grey Warren, House of Many Ways, or Extraordinary, check that vlog out, because that's where I really go in depth on each of those books, because that was a week-long readathon and I was able to get quite a bit of reading done. Okay, so now let's talk about some stats. So in the month of November, I finished 12 books. Now I am counting my DNFs. In that total, I read 10 complete books, DNF 2, but 12 books total, because I do count DNFs towards my total books read, since I am not going to go back to them. So 12 books read for a total of 3,580 pages. I also read the longest book of the year for me, which was A Promised Land by Barack Obama. This book clocks in, counting the notes and things, at 751 pages, but the story itself stops at page 702. So by far the longest book that I read this year. It's this whole big chunk. I would highly recommend the audio for this. I really, really liked hearing him tell his story. I feel like it's a lot more impactful that way. So this was the longest book of the year so far that I have read. And I also believe I read the shortest book of the month, this month as well, which was The Favorite by Kiera Cass. This is, again, a novella set in her Selection series, which I think came in at like 50 pages. Now, in November, I read 5 ebooks, 4 audiobooks, 1 physical book, and I read 2 that were a combo of either ebook, audiobook, or physical audiobook. And then I also finished 4 series. I continued with 2 series, and I decided to DNF 1 series, which was Daughter of Smoke and Bone. And that's that, y'all. That is my quick November reading recap, taking you through the 12 books that I read or DNF'd in the month, and hopefully you enjoyed it. So if you did, please leave me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to my channel if you would like to see more from me. Do check out those vlogs that I linked down below if you want more information on the books that I mentioned here, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, everyone.